supernatural, and his powers of digesting it were extraordinary, and both had been increased by this spellbound region. No tale was too gross or monstrous for his insatiable appetite. Then, as he walked home by swamp and stream and dark woodland to the farmhouse where he happened to be staying, every sound of nature at that witching hour fluttered his excited imagination. The moan of the whip-poor-will from the hillside, the cry of the tree toad, the dreary hooting of the screech owl, to the sudden rustling in the thicket of birds frightened from their roost. His only resource on such occasions, either to drown thought or drive away all evil spirits, was to sing psalm tunes. And the good people of Sleepy Hollow, as they sat by their doors of an evening, were often filled with awe at hearing his nasal melody floating from the distant hill or along the dark and dusky road. Another of his sources of fearful pleasure was to pass long winter evenings with the old Dutch wives and listen to their marvellous tales of ghosts and goblins, and haunted fields, and haunted brooks, and haunted bridges and haunted houses, and particularly of the Headless Horseman, or the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow, as they like to call him. He would delight them just as much with his anecdotes of witchcraft and of the frightful omens and frightening sights and sounds in the air, which used to appear in the early days of Connecticut's history, and would scare the pants off them with speculations upon comets and shooting stars. But if there was pleasure in all this as he sat by the fireside, it was dearly bought by the terrors of his walk home. How often was he terrified by some shrub covered by snow, which, like a sheeted spectre, stood in his own path? How often did he shrink with blood-curdling awe at the sound of his own steps on the frosty crust beneath his feet, and dread to look over his shoulder, in case he should see some supernatural being tramping close behind him? And how often was he thrown into complete dismay by some rushing blast howling among the trees, in the idea that it was the Headless Horseman on one of his nightly death rides? All these, however, were mere terrors of the night, phantoms of the mind that walk in darkness. And though he had seen many spectres in his time, in his lonely walks, daylight put an end to all these evils. And he would have passed a pleasant life if his path had not been crossed by a being that causes more bother to men than ghosts, goblins, and a whole race of witches put together. And that was a woman. Come. Among the musical disciples who assembled every Tuesday to receive his instructions in psalm singing was Katrina van Tassel, the daughter and only child of a rich Dutch farmer. She was a booming lass of 18, plump as a partridge, ripe and melting, and rosy-cheeked as one of her father's peaches, and universally famed, not merely for her beauty, but her vast inheritance. She was a terrible flirt, which you could tell from the dresses that she spilled out of. She wore ornaments of pure yellow gold, which her great-great-grandmother had brought over from Holland. And to top it off, a provokingly short skirt to display the prettiest foot and ankle in the country. Ichabod Crane had a soft and foolish heart towards women, and you shouldn't be surprised that he fancied this lady, more especially after he had visited her in her father's mansion. Old Baltus van Tassel was a perfect picture of a thriving, contented, liberal-hearted farmer. He seldom, it is true, sent either his eyes or his thoughts beyond the boundaries of his own farm. But within those, everything was snug, happy, and, above all, rich. A rich farmer. Imagine. His house was situated on the banks of the Hudson, in one of those green, sheltered, fertile nooks in which the Dutch farmers are so fond of nestling. Near the farmhouse was a vast barn, big as a church, every nook and cranny of which was full of harvest grain. Big fat pigs were grunting in their pens. A stately squadron of snowy geese were riding in a nearby pond. Regiments of turkeys were gobbling through the farmyard, and guinea fowls fretting about it like ill-tempered housewives with their peevish, discontented cry. Before the barn door strutted their gallant cock, the very image of a married man, a warrior and a fine gentleman, clapping his bronze-coloured wings and crowing in the pride and gladness of his heart. Ichabod Crane's mouth watered as he looked upon his future Christmas dinner. He pictured to himself a roasting pig running about with an apple in his mouth. He pictured the pigeons snugly tucked into a comfortable pie, the geese swimming in their own gravy, and the ducks with a decent dollop of onion sauce.